Welcome to the Freak Show podcast, hosted by Sam Thurmond and Jacqueline Steele Thurmond. Sam is an Air Force Academy graduate and veteran who, after his service and 2 deployments, escaped the 9-to-5 grind by building a real estate investing business that has, to date, accounted for over $50 million in real estate transactions. Jacqueline is an award-winning musician, former owner of boutique branding agency Steele International, real estate investor, and designer for luxury multi-million-dollar homes.
We are so excited to welcome you to the Freak Show podcast, where we center our content around the frequency of belief.
Why? Because when we overcome fear and self-doubt, basically by getting out of our own way, we can make the impossible possible.
And in this podcast, we are going to share our favorite mindset tools and life lessons that have completely transformed our lives and businesses. So without further ado, let's get freaky. Hello, and welcome back to the Freak Show. I'm Jacqueline Steele Thurmond. I'm joined by my husband, Sam Thurmond. And today, episode number 12, we are going to talk about how we apply the frequency of belief to our business. So the Freak Show, the reason we named it the Freak Show is because freak stands for frequency.
Right.
And specifically, the frequency of belief. And this is something this is the hill that we are going to die on, basically. We feel so strongly about this. And if you've been in business or just living life for any length of time, you know that it can feel like being on a roller coaster, right?
Yep.
There are high highs, there are low lows, and a lot of confusing and maddening moments in between. And Sam and I have applied a belief system, one, like we said, we call the frequency of belief. We've applied this to our business and our lives, and it's radically changed how we operate within both. And we may not be able to change physical circumstances, though in many ways, I believe that we can, but we can change the energy that we bring into them, right? And just like Dr. Joe Dispensa says, when you change your energy, you change your life. In the last few episodes, 9, 10, and 11, we've been talking about the things that we've been doing wrong and that we are correcting. Mm-hmm. But in this episode, we're going to be talking about mostly what we've been doing right, which is recognizing and living on the frequency of belief.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's review. What is the frequency of belief, Sam?
Yeah. So the frequency of belief is knowing what you want and choosing to relentlessly believe it'll happen. Beyond that it is happening, meaning not just believing that it's going to happen, that feeling that frequency that it is already, it already is, and it already is happening.
It's on its way. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah. It's putting yourself in a state, putting yourself in the state energetically that you want.
Yeah.
And it's not dependent on anything else happening. You're putting yourself there and you're feeling what it feels like to be that.
Yeah.
Because you are your energy.
Yeah.
And so if your energy is what you want it to be, then you are that thing that you want.
My favorite healer therapist of all time, Vanya, now many years ago, said to me, Jacqueline, picture who you want to be 5-7 years from now. What is that person like? What kind of energy do they have? And I started thinking about it. I started getting into that state. And she looked at me and she goes, now be that now.
Yeah.
Just be it now.
Yeah.
And it's so simple. It is so simple, but it is so effective. And that really, to me, is the key to manifestation. You need to know what you want. You need to believe that it can happen in the first place. And then you need to hold that energy and live on that energy.
Yeah, I think oftentimes when people hear things like this that aren't into this sort of thing,
metaphysical.
The metaphysical will write it off, but it's very logical when you break it down. And I think that's why
it supercharges everything.
That's why I like it so much, is because I can apply logic to it. Mm-hmm. Because if you feel a certain way, like say you put yourself in this state of what you're looking to attain, and then energetically you become that, then from there your thoughts become your, what's the order?
Yeah. Your thoughts become your words become your actions become your reality.
Right. Exactly. So it's A, B, C, D. You're just making it so you're operating in this current state to where you're taking the actions, you're saying the words, and you're creating exactly what you want. So to me, it makes total
Perfect
sense. It's not woo-woo.
And
it's
I think
not
if
like, it's not just trying to create something out of thin air. It's not that whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's an active, hold on one sec. Sorry.
Is your phone going off?
My phone's going off.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to take over. And I feel like a very micro way to think about this is, let's say your goal is to be a millionaire. Okay. If you want to apply the frequency of belief to becoming a millionaire, you think about what it would feel like for you to have $1 million in your bank account. What does that feel like when you wake up first thing in the morning and you know that you have that safety net there? What does it feel like at lunchtime when you are going to get your favorite lunch and you know that you have that $1 million in your bank account? How does that change the way you operate? How does that show up in your relationships? How does that show up when you are by yourself? How does that show up when you're approaching your work? What energy does that bring? And when you start operating out of that high frequency of having already attained that goal, it changes the energy you bring to every area of your life.
Right. Yeah. So how do you feel like, how did we come upon this? How did we stumble upon this and bring it into our lives?
Well, it was kind of retrospective, right? Is that a word? Retrospective. Okay. And what happened
if you believe it.
I do believe it. And what happened was we realized that we were in a pretty short amount of time reaching goals that we had set for ourselves. So I remember it must have been 2014, I wrote in my journal that I wanted a BMW and I preferably wanted it to be white with a tan interior, right? I would say 6 to 8 months later, we stumbled upon that car.
Yeah, but you're also leaving out that there were like multiple things on that list that also
I just
came
tend
to fruition.
be more positive.
It's something that we laugh about because it was very Jacqueline to have at the end of the list. BMW, I think you said like 3 Series at the time. It was like BMW 3 Series in parentheses.
Preferably white.
Yeah, it was very on brand.
It was very on brand. And then I had that.
And then you had it.
Yeah. And it's not just physical things that have manifested. Also having a child. Well, I guess that is a physical thing. I mean, material things. Sorry, let me retract that. But it's more than just physical things. But another great example is I've always loved Spanish style homes. That's my dream home. And when we moved to Scottsdale, we ended up renting a mid-mod house and it was so cute. But when I got pregnant, I had this feeling that overcame me that was like a Spanish style house is going to fall into your lap when you least expect it. And a year and a half later, our house that we live in now, that we renovated, our Spanish style house, fell into our lap. Everything worked out perfectly. We got the interest rate we wanted on it. We got it owner finance, like all the things just happened so beautifully. And I just knew that that's exactly what was going to happen before it happened. So yeah, I think retrospectively, we just realized our minds are so powerful. And when we write something down and we believe that it is on its way and we work toward it, we're not just passively hanging out, we work toward it, that just further communicates to God that this is what we want to create. And I believe that, just like Paulo Coelho says, when you set your mind to something, the whole universe conspires to help you achieve it. And it's true. In my experience, that's exactly what has happened.
Yeah.
You wrote in here, working from home, creating a business, creating a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that?
Just along the same lines of what you're saying, I think we stumbled upon it because we were doing it without
without putting a name to it,
without having a structure around it. I think that's where Do the Impossible is really impactful on me. The book, Do the Impossible is, it put a structure around
By
it
Jason
for me.
Dries.
But when I got out of the military, we moved to California for a while. I was I was doing the 1.5-hour commute to San Francisco both ways every day, and it was just killing me. And I remember thinking how amazing it would be to work from home and to start a business and just create this lifestyle that just seemed ideal, and I remember I used to, oftentimes I would draw scenes that I wanted to experience. And I remember basically drawing our home that we had in Athens before we ever had it. Yeah. Its location, its location as far as just proximity to the gym and to different things in town. And then we had that. And at the time I was working for a baby food company, and I just wanted, it was before everybody, it was way before COVID. So it was before everybody was working from home. And I thought it would be so cool to be able to work from home and work remotely. And then the business was purchased and moved to New Jersey, and I stayed on, and I was able to work from home and wanted to start a business. And because I was able to work from home, I was able to moonlight and do some other things to start a business. And then ultimately we just had this lifestyle that, as we looked back on it, everything that we were wanting and everything that we were putting down and everything, all the visions I was drawing, those things were happening exactly, maybe
as
not
we,
exactly, but
as we wanted them to,
along the lines of how we wanted to.
I think a story that's really pertinent to that is before you got the job with Sprout. And this is also what happens, God, the universe, however you want to define it, sends tests. So we have an idea of what we want, and we're, working for it. Maybe you're calling in a partner. Maybe you're calling in your perfect job. Maybe you're calling in a home. Maybe you're calling in a family, whatever it is, you're working toward it. And sometimes God sends us tests. And I believe in what I've read and believe to be true is that God sends us these tests to go, are you going to settle for what is less than you deserve? Or are you going to see this as a test and wait until you get exactly what you want?
And see, I don't disagree with that.
Okay.
But the way I see it is you're in a transitory period, right? So it'll make more sense.
The transitory period is knowing what you want, but you don't have it yet.
Period. Transition is a much better word to use. You're in a transition period where it'll make more sense as we tell this next story about the job offer and those sorts of things. But you're in this state, transitioning into this state, from this person into this person. So you're still experiencing both states, right? So there are things that are happening as you of your current self, and there are things that are happening of you transitioning to the
future self.
Right. So whether they're opportunities or obstacles, you're experiencing both of those states. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so you have the option to choose
what you would have chosen
versus what you've been experiencing and what has been your reality.
What your old self would choose or what your new self is going to choose.
Yeah. So is there something else you're going to say? I was going to explain the situation.
Do you know what situation I'm even talking about?
You're talking about the job?
Dole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to explain that.
Perfect. I'm glad that we both knew what we were talking about.
Yeah.
This was not in our notes.
Yeah. So when we were living in California, I was working for Nestle Waters, schlepping bottled water all around the Bay Area and managing warehouses and that sort of thing.
And I had a record contract. I was doing songwriting every day. So I was in my element. I was loving life.
I was not.
Yeah, he was miserable.
That was the first time I don't think I've ever had a nervous breakdown, but I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown there because
He was
sitting
burnt
in
out
traffic
burnt out.
every day. I drove to work, then drove home, then went to sleep to get ready to drive to work.
And you were doing the reserves one weekend a month.
Yeah, still doing the reserves in the military. So it was just not, it was not what I wanted life to be whatsoever. And it was really wearing on me. So Jacqueline had some opportunities with music in Atlanta. And I'm from Georgia. So we moved back to Georgia, quit my job there, moved back to Georgia.
Quit his job in California.
Yeah. Didn't really have anything set up as far as work goes. I was helping my dad do home inspections and that sort of thing here and there. But
we moved across the country with no jobs, which I think people think is crazy.
Yeah,
but
and we moved in with my parents too, until we kind of got things figured out. And while we were in that period of living with my parents, I didn't really
Which was a period of about 8 months.
I didn't have a job, and everybody's ready to have their own space and kind of get on with their lives. And
I was doing music and working for an interior designer.
So I was looking for jobs.
Yeah,
basically is what it comes down to. And I was working with the military recruiter that helps place veterans in jobs. And I had an opportunity come up that was very similar to my job in California, basically manufacturing and logistics. And it was in Atlanta. Wasn't really in an area that we necessarily wanted to live, but it was a quote unquote good job.
And it was the best salary he would have made to date at that time.
I think it was very similar to California. I think it was like $80,000 a year, something like that. So it was a quote unquote good job at that point in time. And 9 people out of 10 would have looked at our situation and said, you 100% need to take this job. And I came to you and I was just like, I don't want to do this. Like I know where we're at. I understand the situation. I know that this could logically makes sense to move in another direction. But I was also coming up with basically my first business idea at the time, and I was developing that too, and I was really passionate about it at the time. And so I came to you, and you being the wife and partner that you are, very clearly told me that if this is not what you want, then don't do it. And you pushed me to pursue what I was building, and you had it felt like you truly supported me, not like, well, if I'll hold it against you later. But in this moment,
and I never held it against you.
And it never felt like that. I never felt like that. And basically what happened at that point is I turned down the job, and maybe not very long
4 or
after,
6 weeks later.
Yeah. Not,
if that.
Maybe a month later, a friend of my brother's was having a conversation with my brother about how he was looking to bring someone on with his business that had a very similar, and he was looking for someone with a similar background to mine. And my brother put me in contact with him, and he asked me to come on the spot. And it was in a fantastic location that was paying twice, I think at least, what the other job was paying.
Yeah, so significantly more.
It was mind blowing at that point in time.
We had never made that much money ever.
Yeah. And so of course I took that job, and then one thing led to the next. And that was I worked for that company for a year, and then that's the company that got bought out. And then I was able to work remotely for that company. So all that to say, the reason that happened, or that was an opportunity, was because I turned down the other quote unquote
sexy opportunity. Yeah.
No,
it was not.
I had the sexy opportunity because I turned down the other one.
Well, is that
what you're saying?
No, what I meant was, like, when you are in a state of struggle, you're living with your parents. We are living with your parents. We're living off of our savings and it's dwindling and I'm not
a large savings at the time.
yeah. And I was working, but I wasn't making very much money.
Yeah.
I was working for an interior designer and doing music. So, we were just barely scraping by. When you get an opportunity like the one from Dole, where you get a salary and healthcare and blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And it's a very decent salary for that point in time for people in their late 20s. I was 27. You were maybe 30. Mm-hmm. It was a great opportunity. It could be considered like a sexy opportunity, but
I guess I never thought of Dole as being a sexy opportunity.
Well, it's not literally sexy, Sam. It's just in your mind, like an opportunity that would make things a lot easier.
Yeah.
And you turned it down, and I supported you in turning it down because I trust you. And I also know that I just have this like undeniable belief that life is happening for us and that God is creating circumstances and opportunities that are going to lead to our expansion and growth no matter what and no matter how painful.
Right. Yeah. And I think I was listening to a podcast at one point where they were discussing the most successful people, and hands down the most successful people are all people who expect good things to happen. Not the people who expect the worst to happen or bad things. It all comes down to what is your expectation, which all ties back to what is your frequency of belief. Yeah. What do you believe is going to happen?
And we're not saying don't ever consider things that could go wrong. When you're creating a business, you want to, of course, believe that everything is going to work out in your favor, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't consider things in your plan that could go awry. It's good to be prepared, and it's good to really understand the business that you're in, the pros and the cons. But overall, the belief system walking in needs to be one where everything is happening in your favor.
Right.
So I think what will be useful now is if we talk about what our business is like when we're out of the frequency of belief compared to what it's like when we're in the frequency.
It feels clunky.
Yeah. Like we're running on square wheels.
Yeah.
It's boom, just boom, boom.
It's just an overall feeling of instability, because if you're out of the frequency of belief, it means that you are doubting what you're doing.
Yeah.
And the entrepreneurship can be very lonely and isolating at times.
Yeah.
Because you are looking at, not that you should be, but at times you can compare yourself, and you're looking at the people who have taken the more the more traditional approach, and kind of steady as it goes. And, you can question yourself in that process as time goes on when maybe things aren't working the way that you need them to work. So it gives you such a feeling of instability, but in that feedback loop, it shows you that you're focusing on all the wrong things. Mm-hmm. You're focusing on what someone else has versus what you truly want to have, and want to be or are. And so when you get out of that frequency of belief, it can feel, you feel very unstable, because at the end of the day, you have to face fears, you have to face challenges, you have to turn down opportunities, like we said, in order for the right opportunity. And when outside of the frequency of belief, it just feels like you're trying to push everything to make it happen versus operating in the flow state.
Yeah.
And having things.
Yeah.
It's
depleting, and you feel like 99% of your energy is just grinding instead of there being a push and pull where that tank is being filled up regularly too. You just feel constantly like you're being emptied.
Right.
And I think in my personal entrepreneurial journey, and this is something that I've realized more recently, is that when we go through those difficult periods where every entrepreneur goes through times where like things are tight, whether it's monetarily or idea wise or opportunity wise, whatever, my perspective now is to zoom out and go, this is just a tiny period in a very long game, in a very long life. And when I come at it from that perspective, it's so much easier to push through because I realize it's so temporary and the good times will flow again.
Yeah.
And that also helps me to stay on a frequency of belief. Yeah. So what is our business like when we are in the frequency of belief?
Opportunities abound.
Yeah.
I think is
people will be calling us left and right. It's wild.
Yeah.
Wild, wild, wild.
Yeah. Well, you're emitting
a higher frequency.
You're emitting the energy of what you are looking to attain, and what our energy is consistent of is, abundance and creating a brand and creating a business and creating consistency.
Value for other people.
Yeah. And really putting value, into our community.
Yeah.
And that energy is so attractive.
Yeah. It makes people want to work with us.
Yeah. And so it's, it feels like magic at times, but again, back to it logically makes sense too, because things just start popping and things
when you
happen
feel good
and the phone starts
you attract
ringing.
Good.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you were listening to the Him and Her podcast. Is it Him and Her or His and Her?
Him and Her
podcast. When I walked in, we were getting ready this morning, and that sounded like an interesting conversation.
It was really good. It was about controlling your emotions.
Yeah. When she was talking about the magic mindset that people can also get in when they feel like it's all just manifesting and it's like just going to happen if I think about it and I manifest it. And I think there have been moments where that's I've experienced that, where you lean a little,
like in the sacred.
Yeah. You get sold a story that if you just
think about it long enough, then it's going to happen.
Sit in a room and just envision it in your mind. That's not going to work.
And sometimes it works, but action is the biggest catalyst for things to happen.
Right.
If you take action and you stay on the frequency of belief, it's going to happen.
And the frequency of belief leads you to take action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the vibe. It is such a good vibe.
Yeah.
I feel like with our business too, when we're in the frequency of belief, our faith is just like, we're in a good spot of faith. Mm-hmm. We are, not only does faith fuel the frequency of belief, but it also increases as the frequency of belief just gets stronger and stronger and stronger, because you realize it's so real. There's also a release of control when we're living on the frequency of belief. It's like Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment. We also let go of a lot of control, and it creates more space to be creative. It creates more space to pivot and be flexible in our business, which allows for more opportunity and more growth, more creativity, more joy, more pure energy source. We've talked about in the past burning energy that isn't clean. It's like burning fossil fuels versus burning, I don't even know if electric cars are clean energy, but
we're basically saying we're running off of stress and anxiety and fear
instead of overflow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so being on the frequency of belief, when you are in that state, no matter what is going on, you could have $10 in your bank account. Yes, you need to be realistic about that. You need to take action on how to increase your bank account. But at the same time, you believe that abundance is on its way, and you act out of a state of energy as if abundance is already here.
Right.
Right? Doesn't mean you go out and spend a bunch of money, but you go into situations going, this isn't going to be my situation forever. I'm not only going to have $10 in my bank account forever. Mm-hmm. This is very temporary. Yeah. So how do we prime ourselves to operate out of the frequency of belief as often as possible? Because this is something that we're very intentional about. We are, I would say, very consistent about getting our minds right. And when one of us is out of sync, we will call each other out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's one of the biggest advantages of having, your spouse as your business partner. And I know that this isn't just as it relates to business, but, that's so much of our lifestyle is working together. Mm-hmm. And I think that we've gotten better and better at that. Mm-hmm. And we're starting to just get so much better at recognizing what that other person needs. I told you before, there have been a couple instances where I don't know if it's just a man thing that like we just don't. You got to get slapped across the face in order to like.
Not
wake
literally.
up.
I haven't literally slapped you across the face.
But I had a conversation with my buddy Justin about this, and because his wife is the same way, and their relationship is the same way in that you need to give the hard feedback sometimes. And sometimes it needs to be a little harsh. Like it's with love, but it wakes you up.
The truth in love.
It's with love, but it's harsh enough to get your attention.
Yeah.
And to get my attention.
Yeah.
And you have an ability to do that. And I think that I have learned how and when to give you that feedback much better too.
Well, and I think with me, and every couple is different, but again, like know thyself. Harsh feedback is something that Sam really reacts to and resonates with. Harsh feedback is not something that I resonate with because I'm already so harsh on myself. So just like with our son, when this just started happening recently, I shushed him. I was like, shh, because he was being really loud. And my intention wasn't to hurt his feelings, but he immediately started weeping like I had lashed him. And it's because he's sensitive and he didn't want me. It hurt his feelings when he thought I was silencing him. And so feedback for me, I'm always open to honest feedback, but I like it to be very monotone, I guess. It's not that I need you to be gentle with me, but I'm so hard on myself already. When you give me really harsh feedback, it has the potential to kind of put me into a tailspin. So I like honest feedback that is said softly.
There's a delivery, certainly.
Yeah.
There's
and you like football
to
coach feedback.
Yeah. Well, it's what it's gets my attention, I think is what really happens and kind of snaps me out of whatever fog I'm in and not seeing things clearly and says, hey, you really need to look at this.
Yeah. And I need him to grab me by the shoulder and just go, hey, I know that this is what you're experiencing right now, but I think you could use a change in perspective with A, B, and C. And that is enough to get my attention.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think at the core of it, it's the same message.
Oh, for sure.
And it's stuff that...
For sure.
It's stuff that I think as a partner and as a spouse, it would be easy to shy away from saying.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to upset the other person.
Yeah. And these are super important.
But that's the most important stuff.
It's the most important stuff. And like relationship dynamics, we can talk about that in another episode because that's certainly that's a lot of content. But knowing your partner and knowing how they respond to feedback is really important. So I've learned over the years, because I used to give Sam feedback the way that I like feedback, which is a hand on the shoulder, looking into somebody's eyes, telling them like all the things they're doing well, and then telling them where they need to improve. But he does like...
I was just like, well, I'm doing all this stuff great, so I guess I'm batting 900.
Yeah. And he used to give me feedback like a football coach, and I would then internalize it and beat myself up even more. And so understanding that like you've got to give feedback in a way that the other person can receive. And that can be a simple question too. Like, hey, what's the best way you receive feedback? Do you like it a little bit more harsh, or do you like it to be a little gentler?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then respecting that for the other person too.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff.
Good stuff. So how we prime to operate out of the frequency of belief. We're really honest with each other when we're out. We are really, really good about keeping a baseline. The start of this year, as we talked about in the last few episodes, has been tough, but we are getting back to that baseline of sleep, exercise, clean diet, which we didn't really get off of, but clean diet, self-care fundamentals that just fill us up so that we're operating out of overflow instead of burnout. Meditation, framing, prayer. Prayer is so underrated, y'all. Pray, pray, pray. It makes such a giant difference. Putting our phones down and eliminating some of this distraction also makes it so much easier to be in a high frequency mental state and be on the frequency of belief. And then doing things that aren't work related. This is part of our recipe. We love to work. We are married. We are business partners. So there's just a lot of work involved in our lives, and that's how we like it. That's what we want. We want to build a lot of things in this lifetime, but also doing things that aren't work related fills our cup, and it allows us to create clarity in our lives. It gives us space for creativity and inspiration. And that engages the frequency of belief because we're not burnt out. We're not exhausted. We are not, our joy bank isn't depleted. So those are some of the ways that we prime ourselves to stay on the frequency of belief. Daily mind exercises. I think that is the key. Yeah.
All right. So here's the audience question that we're going to leave you with today. What is your BHAG, big hairy ass goal for those military folks out there? A big hairy audacious goal for you corporate types. What does it feel like to accomplish that goal? Can you hold on to that feeling?
Y'all, thank you for listening today. We cannot wait to connect with you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to The Freak Show with Sam Thurmond and me, Jaclyn Steele Thurmond. We would love to connect with you via our website, beckonliving.com, and on social media.
You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Beck and Living, and you can join our email list to receive uplifting messages, podcast and business updates, and discounts on high frequency products just for our freaky community.
Cheers to high frequency living.